Welcome to the Rocky Virtual Clinic, Spring Clinic of 2021. So we're going to, my name's Darcy Gunderson. I'm the service manager here at the Camrose Rocky Mountain Equipment branch. I'm going to be doing just kind of a quick walk around of Case QuadTrac that we have here today. This is a 580, it's a 2021 model. We're going to just be going through some maintenance items, some things to check. So you're ready when you're about ready to hit the field. So I think we're just going to kind of start over here on the left-hand side. We do have the batteries up here. I'll just jump up. So under this cover on the QuadTrac is where the batteries are kept. So obviously, you know, step one, just make sure nothing froze over the winter. Check your connections underneath here, make sure everything's tight, and it should be good to start. Also, while I'm up here, I might just point out that on this air intake tube, we do have a screen filter. You might recognize those from some of the older tractors. Now, we had a few complaints, I guess, on some of the I guess the earlier model QuadTracs of the air filters plugging. If you do have that problem and you don't have that big circle screen up there, there is a kit that you can get to add this tube along with that top screen, and that can help keep your air filters a little cleaner if you're having trouble with that. I'm going to move around and just pop the hood here. So on the higher horsepower 580s, I believe it's 580s and up, there is a secondary cooling system. So you'll see you've got two coolant reservoirs right here on the left-hand side. And the secondary system is actually for the turbo intercoolers, because we have twin turbos on this thing. So for the intercoolers, it runs its own cooling system. This here is actually the radiator for that secondary cooling system. And it's just kind of got some pins here on each side. And then this thing will fold down out of the way and you can clean it out really well. So obviously in this area, you're going to want to make sure you're free of all the debris and everything before you hit the field so you don't have cooling problems. Over here is you'll see it looks like a test fitting. This is actually a bleed vent for this secondary cooling system. So there is a procedure in the operator's manual that uses this vent line that's kind of just stored up here. And that helps bleed the system if you're filling or changing the coolant in this secondary system. Another area up front here you just want to watch for is this hood latch system. It does have kind of a little bracket back here behind the pin, and you just want to make sure that's not contacting any of the coolers in this area. So moving over here, you can see this is one of the intercoolers for the turbos, and there is one kind of in front of the engine down in this area. But so those, you'll see the two intercoolers if you have twin turbos. Also on the some of the older models, there's a big intake pipe over here for the air intake that goes to the air cooler that's up front here. There are some bolts here where it bolts onto the side of this cooling package, and we've seen those crack and it can dislodge the pipe and cause issues there with the intake system. So something else to watch out for. Moving around now, we'll talk a little bit about the track system. This is a QuadTrac, so it's a little bit more complicated than just having tires. As you can see here, we've got the clear caps on this one. Some of the older models QuadTracs don't have the clear cap system. Now you can upgrade to them. There are kits available to upgrade to these clear caps, and it is very beneficial. The time that it takes to actually physically remove the plugs on the non-clear cap system is quite, it takes some time. So to just be able to walk around your tractor as well as roll underneath, because obviously everything you see here, all 5 of these rollers is the exact same on the inside. So you're going to want to check all these levels before hitting the field every year. And obviously if you have clear caps, that really cuts that time to check those down quite a bit. So also right here, this big plate with these 6 bolts, 3 on each end, this is how you adjust your track tension, or your track alignment, sorry. And there's some nuts here. The procedure is in the operator's manual on how to do this, but you basically just drive it in a straight line, let it coast to a stop, and then you go ahead and you just check these drive lugs against these idler wheels at the front as well as at the back, and that'll tell you if your track is in alignment or not. And it's important that it is aligned so these lugs are contacting this big drive roller properly, and you're not going to damage these lugs. So that's something to check. You'll probably want to do that at least once a year. I believe the operator's manual says 200 hours, but so that's about once a year for a seeding tractor anyway. As well, on this big wheel here, you want to keep the mud off of it and stuff, and there's a mud scraper mounted down underneath this beam. There's 2 big bolts here with some slotted holes. I believe that gap between the plate and the wheel is 3 millimeters, and that'll be measured right here. And it's kind of a U shape, so because of this space inside the wheel, so there's a contact point on each of these flat surfaces of the drive wheel. And that's something, again, you'll want to check probably prior to seeding every year. The other stuff you're just going to want to look at is basically just the rubber. Make sure this rubber is not coming off these wheels. If it's starting to crack and stuff, for the most part that's okay, but once they can fatigue enough to where this rubber will actually debond from the roller itself and fall right off. So it's something to really look at. I believe there's reman options available, as well as there are places in some of the bigger centers that can put new rubber on these. There's also some rubber blocks down under here, and again, same thing, just make sure they're not cracked up and ready to fall apart. So moving on now, probably into this center area. The hydraulic reservoir is here, as well as you got your def fill. There is another fill on the other side for the def tank, but hydraulic tank, very important for hydraulic and transmission, which is right here. You'll see this decal for Hi-Tran ultra traction. This is pretty important. Hi-Tran oil has very good ability to trap water in it. It has awesome water retention, and the water retention we see in Hi-Tran is far more superior than any jobber oil you're going to find somewhere else at some of your local stores. So very important to run Hi-Tran in this stuff, especially the transmission. Those clutch discs do not like water, and Hi-Tran does an awesome job of retaining that water and keeping them off the disc. So just something to note there. We'll move on back to kind of the back of the tractor now. A lot of you guys will probably notice a big change back here are the remote valves. So this is a change now, 2021s. They do come, these are 3/4, these bottom 2. But so they've changed these up. Now the older one's just a little different style, but good idea to make sure all this stuff is clean. You don't want, you know, obviously you got dirty couplers and you're attaching hoses and everything, that dirt can find its way into your hydraulic system. So just make sure everything's clean back here. And obviously when we do inspections at the shop, we do flow these remote couplers. So we usually flow them all both ways. So we'll flow, you know, pressure side this way, pressure side this way. We'll flow them both ways and just make sure they're functioning properly. We'll come back to this center area. It's a little easier to see on this side. Now in here you do have this big steady bearing for the rear end drive shaft. There's two grease nipples kind of pointing to the other side, so that's a 50-hour interval. Important to keep those up. Same with like a lot of these cylinder pins and stuff in here. There's grease nipples on all that, and pretty much everything in this area is 50 hours with the exception of this, the PTO. So this tractor has a PTO, and that's what this shaft is for. This PTO slip yoke, as well as the steady bearing on the PTO, is a 600-hour interval. So, but everything else pretty much on the tractor is 50 hours. Now also with the cab suspension, there's some track bars underneath here. The front one is quite difficult to get at. This is the rear one, obviously. Now you're going to want to give these things a good shake in there, as well as the shocks and everything like that, and make sure none of this cab suspension is loose. We've noticed on a few of them where those bolts even just loosen off a little bit, and it can cause some serious noise, vibration into the cab itself. So you got anything loose on these track bars, any of the hardware, it's a good idea just to tighten it up. Now in behind this door, it's going to look a little different again on the newer units. This sensor on some of the older ones is actually right on the bottom. They've moved it to the side here. This is the def quality sensor. So that's, we do recommend that you drain this tank for winter storage. As you can see, the washer fluid reservoir and pumps that sit here on the older units is now gone. It's moved up under the cab. But this area in here would really fill with a lot of moisture, a lot of dirt, stuff like that, and that would cause some bad connections on those on the washer pumps for the windshields. So it's something to look at if you've got that older style tractor, is have a peek in this area, make sure you're keeping it clean, so you can avoid some issues there, especially if you're using your washer fluid a lot. So they've moved this sensor too into the tank, from the bottom to the side. The bottom was causing a few issues. It seemed like the crystallized stuff, if you've left some def in here over the winter, it would just crystallize enough, a little bit at the bottom, and you'd have def quality codes when you go to start in the spring. So moving it up here probably going to help a bit, as well as the wires for the quality sensor when they're sitting down here would freeze into that dirt and stuff that built up on the washer reservoir, and it would pull out of the sensor. So so they kind of relocated that for a few reasons. This is the def pump itself. Underneath this guy here, you just screw that off. There is a main filter in there. Just follow your recommended, in the operator's manual, just follow the recommended service intervals on that. Over up top here, this is where your def pump sucks out of the tank. So you might want to even just take a peek under there and make sure all those connections are good. There's not any leaks under there, anything like that, because they can cause issues and obviously some error codes down the way. And this is your second def tank fill over here. So you do have one on each side. You do have some fuses in this area as well as your battery shutoffs. But yeah, there are some fuses underneath these covers. Filters, hydraulic filters, you know, preventative maintenance wise, once a year even, just do them, then you know they're good, and you know that your filters are going to do a good job. So okay, so that sums it up for on the other side of this door. A couple more things on the engine I want to touch on. Just jump up here again. Okay, so in back behind here is the engine crankcase breather filter. It is somewhat difficult to get at. It's kind of a miserable job, but it is important to change this. We've been telling guys yearly, just to do it yearly, and then you know it's good. And what that filter does back there is it actually filters the oil vapors out of the air that's coming out of your crankcase, kind of for emissions purposes. But what can happen is that can get plugged up, and when that air and stuff can't escape, obviously your crankcase pressure increases. And once that happens, if it's bad enough, you can start blowing, you know, front and rear crank seals, oil pan gaskets, valve cover gaskets, stuff like that can start happening. It'll just find the weakest spot and attack it. So it's very important to keep that nice and clean. Like I say, we recommend just doing it yearly, and you know it's done. Another thing about these cooling systems that I talked about at the start is the type of coolant. Now you'll see this is kind of a yellowish kind of green color, but you'll see this big decal here on this bottom reservoir, ActiFill OT coolant. So that's the newer style coolant that we're running, and you have to, you need to look for this decal. The newer units, I believe it was somewhere in 2014, 2015 and up, use this OT coolant. Now what you have to be careful of is really this stuff does not mix with your kind of your older coolant or some of the stuff that you might just have laying around the shop. So if you have a newer unit, make sure you stick with that OT coolant. It's very important. That stuff will gum up. It makes like a gel, and then you have big problems and you got to do a whole bunch of flushing. So be careful about that. Now I think that, yeah, have a look at that decal. And I think that pretty much sums up my walk around. I want to thank everybody again for joining us and for watching. Hopefully this helps you get ready for spring. And I wish everybody a happy 2021, and look forward to seeing you at the branch. Thanks.